Hello. Thank you so much for joining me today. How you guys doing? Today I want to do some learning. Okay. I was just kind of scratching my head yesterday thinking, how did the EU come together? That was my question. You know, I've learned some things about the EU. It's a very interesting thing. The EU, of course, comparable in certain ways to America. You know, population, the size of the economy, as far as GDP, stuff like that. You know, it's within the same kind of, obviously I know that America's a country. The EU is not a country. I don't need anybody informing me of that. I do know that. I'll just save you some time typing, you know, in the comments. I'm just kidding. Anyway, I found this really small and up-and-coming obscure YouTube channel, the European Parliament. Check them out, link down below. They're trying to gain some YouTube subscribers. A Road to Unity, the EU's history. That sounds perfect. Like, that's exactly what I wanted, and I figured there's not a better source. I guess this source might be a little bit biased. You know, it's not exactly like a third-party source. But hopefully they've got their history about themselves down pat. Let's see, I'm very curious. How did it happen? Ooh, 1945... Hold on, that's some bad math right there. 1945 is definitely less than 1950.
The death and destruction of the Second World...
Okay, that was blasting my ears out. I don't know if that's as loud for you guys as it was me. Holy crap.
World War made many dream of a united Europe. Fighting
that makes sense.
Nazi occupation had forged a sense of solidarity across many countries. And some European leaders knew unity could offer both peace and prosperity.
Interesting, very interesting. I mean, it does make me wonder, obviously, peace, prosperity, excellent. It makes a lot of sense, you know, uniting Europe under some similar, or you know, an umbrella of regulations or whatever, making it easier to cooperate with each other and travel. I wonder if America, you know, being over there, being such a huge country with a population similar size, if it was like, hey, to compete with America, we could all unite and, you know, collaborate together a lot more effectively. I wonder if that was a thought. Anyway.
We must recreate the European family in a regional structure called, it may be, the United States of Europe. And the first practical step would be to form a Council of Europe.
That would be cool. I mean, that would have been interesting if it was called the United States of Europe. That would have really felt like, okay, this is a direct response to United States of America. And, you know, it's... We are at direct competition with each other, you know? That would be interesting. Just that name.
Il est grand temps, à mon avis, que les pays de l'Europe occidentale essaient de collaborer les uns avec les autres.
La via da percorrere non è facile né sicura, ma deve essere percorsa, e lo sarà.
Couldn't have said that better myself.
Many of these ideas came together at the Congress of Europe, held in The Hague in 1948. As a result of the Congress, the Council of Europe...
I'm really loving this video. It's really feeling like that type of thing where you go to a museum, you sit down, and it's got a little projector, and, you know, you every 10 minutes it loops the same video.
Europe was created in 1949. As a result of the Congress, the Council of Europe was created in 1949. It was a first step towards bringing the countries of Europe together.
Wow. Council de l'Europe.
During both world wars, coal and steel had powered the military machine. In the 1950s, they became the first building blocks for lasting peace in Europe. In 1950, French Foreign Affairs Minister Robert Schuman announced that Germany and France would merge their coal and steel industries. making war between them not only unthinkable, but materially impossible.
I like that. That's cool, you know. Yeah, I hear that a lot, you know, about free trade, especially in the era of Trump's tariffs, you know, kind of wrecking free trade currently. But obviously free trade is good for trade in general is good for peace. But this is a step beyond trade. This is they merged their whole industries together.
All 6 countries joined the initiative, signing the Treaty of Paris in 1951 to create the Coal and Steel Community. The treaty also created a Court of Justice, the forerunner of the European Court of Justice. These signatories committed to not waging war on European soil.
Wow.
After the Treaty of Paris, the next ambitious step was the creation of a European defence community. But in 1954, the project collapsed, exposing the tensions still smouldering within Europe over the fears about Germany's remilitarization. The following year,
I was gonna say I'm a little confused. Like I don't know of what type of, you know, defense as far as the EU, like defense. I've heard murmurs about maybe a military will be built out or something, an EU military. But as of right now, not.
the Messina Conference explored alternative ways for Europeans to unite. The need for cohesion was indisputable. In 1956, the Suez Crisis and the Hungarian uprising brought conflict to the very edges of Western Europe. Shaped by such threats, the 1957 Treaties of Rome created Euratom, the European Atomic Energy Community, and the European Economic Community, the forerunner of the European Union. Even as the newly created European communities were taking their first steps, the world seemed to be descending into chaos. In 1961, the German Democratic Republic erected the Berlin Wall, separating the eastern and western sectors of the city, and splitting communities and even families in two. And in
Families in two. I had never heard about that.
1962, the
That
world
would be interesting if your cousins were on East Germany and you're on West Germany or something.
held its breath as the United States and the Soviet Union almost triggered a nuclear war over the deployment of Soviet missiles in Cuba.
This would have been a scary time to have been alive, you know. I was born after this, and I feel in that way I was almost born into a more naive era, you know. I was born into a world that just felt so peaceful.
In a world where Armageddon seemed a real possibility, French President Charles de Gaulle was uneasy about a Europe where member states would be obliged to relinquish too much of their independence. Whereas the European Commission saw Europe specifically as an organisation that would have powers over the member states. This disagreement led to France boycotting European institutions for 6 months.
It's so interesting to hear it through this lens, you know, because we went through the same thing over here in America as far as federalists, you know, and anti-federalists, you know, the people who wanted states to retain, you know, basically full independence and for there to be almost no federal government here in America long time ago. There's just always that tension, you know, whenever between how much power should be held up top. I guess on one hand, the more power they have up top, you know, the more potential benefit you can all have, all the states can have as far as economically and as far as peace. But also it brings about, you know, concerns over freedom or just, you know, too much central power up top. And if something goes wrong up top, then that's bad because it controls everything.
Gaulle also repeatedly vetoed the United Kingdom's application for European Community membership. European integration ground to a halt. It was only after de Gaulle stepped down from power in 1969 after the student riots on the streets of Paris that Europe's progress towards integration could resume.
Interesting. So France really just had that much power over it all, huh?
In 1969, leaders of European Community member states met in The Hague to relaunch European unity. For the first time, leaders agreed to consult on and to coordinate their national foreign policies. In 1972, EC members made their first attempt at European monetary cooperation, devising a system that limited fluctuations between the different European currencies.
Oh, okay. So it was no longer just a free market of trade between currencies. They were like restricted.
In 1974, the European Council was established, allowing leaders of its member states to meet on a regular basis. In 1975, European Community member states were present at Helsinki when, during a thaw in the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union sat down together for the Conference for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Human rights became part of the negotiations, with the European community leading the fight to make them integral to future relations between all European states. By now, the European community consisted of 9 countries. The United Kingdom, the Republic of Ireland, and Denmark had joined in 1973, while Norway voted to stay out.
Wow.
In 1979, the first European...
I could see how it's a really big decision to kind of, it would feel like to some people you're giving up the sovereignty of your nation, like toward, this, like, whoa, let's stop and think about this,
Parliament
I mean, it's a huge decision, right?
elections were held, making the community more democratic.
And obviously, I don't know, I can always just imagine people being like, it doesn't give up the sovereignty of your nation. It's like, yeah, I know. I'm just saying that some people probably felt that way.
In its inaugural session, the new parliament more democratic. In its inaugural session, the new parliament elected the French politician Simone Veil as its first president. In the years to follow, the Parliament would use its powers to influence the decisions and budgets of the European community. But further integration stalled, with no new ideas on the table and a leadership that was seen as weak. The European community was, however, getting bigger. In 1981, Greece joined, followed by Spain and Portugal in 1986. It was the arrival of Jacques Delors as president of the European Commission that revived the vision of a single common market within Europe. The single market would be achieved by enforcing 4 fundamental freedoms of movement: goods, capital, services, and people.
Wow, that's cool.
There would also be a single currency. As the Iron Curtain collapsed and revolutions swept across Central and Eastern Europe, the need for unity seemed even more imperative. In 1992, the Maastricht Treaty was signed, creating the European Union, bringing with it the single market and a wide set of new powers and policies. The new EU was enlarging. Austria, Sweden, and Finland joined in 1995, and integration was deepening, with measures designed to bridge the gap between rich and poor regions within Europe. Also, in 1995, the Schengen agreements came into force, creating a zone of 5 countries within Europe where people
You don't even need like passports or anything, right? You just go between them.
and goods could move freely. But the European Union also needed to look beyond its united borders. Whilst it had always been a defender of human rights, the massacres in war-torn former Yugoslavia were a grim example of just how hard it was for the EU to take concrete action in the international arena. During the 1990s, 2 ambitious projects gave extraordinary energy to the EU: enlargement and the single currency. By the early 2000s, euro coins were in people's pockets, old currencies had been abandoned, and a European central bank was established.
I feel like this would have been just such, it's not even very long ago, and this would have been such an exciting time to experience being in Europe.
In 2004, 10 more countries joined the EU, the largest single
You know, it would really feel like, wow, we're getting so much done.
expansion in its history, with Romania and Bulgaria joining in 2007. What the EU did not have, however, was a constitution. The German Foreign Affairs Minister, Joschka Fischer, first proposed the idea in 2000. Discussions were shaped by 9/11 and its aftermath, and by disagreements between EU member states over the war in Iraq. But by November 2004,
I need to react to the EU Constitution. Like, I'm sure they're going to touch on it right now a little bit, but I didn't even know you guys had a constitution.
the treaty establishing a constitution had been signed by all member states. The following year, however, the treaty was rejected in national referendums by the people of the Netherlands and France. 2 more years later, instead of a constitution, member states agreed to simply add a new treaty to the existing treaties. The result was the Treaty on the Functioning of the EU, or the
Oh, so it's not technically a constitution.
Lisbon Treaty. Changes included the creation of a
Did, like, the idea of a constitution make some people feel like, okay, that's too much like a nation state?
long-term president of the European Council and a more powerful European Parliament.
I think the EU, I mean, I say this as kind of naively, like from a distance, but to me it looks like you guys have done such an interestingly good job at retaining all the different cultures across Europe while implementing, you know, these universal laws and regulations to help travel and commerce across the state lines, you know, to fuel all that, and while retaining, you know, the culture and the freedoms that are important to individual countries and languages and stuff like that.
In 2008, a financial crisis began to unfold in the Eurozone, threatening its very existence. The European Central Bank and other international financial institutions stepped in as several countries found themselves on the brink of bankruptcy. It became clear that a common currency could not succeed without also having a common financial and economic policy. Protesters grew more angry, but more organized.
Interesting. The Guy Fawkes masks over here in America around the same time, you know, after the bailing out of banks and stuff, and they represented the group called Anonymous, which was kind of this decentralized group of people. And they were mostly against like wealth, like, or in favor of better wealth distribution, you know? Anyway.
Protesters grew more angry, but more organised. Whilst it was clear that international financial organisations were accountable, many also blamed the EU for their situation. And all around Europe's borders, there was growing unrest and upheaval. The Arab Spring in Africa and the Middle East, protests in Turkey, and war in the Ukraine.
Poor kid.
Croatia joined the EU in 2013, but there was no appetite for further enlargement. Citizens were now voicing very clear demands. They wanted more democracy and more transparency. But the best way to achieve this was far from clear. In 2014, the European Parliament was, for the first time, able to elect the President of the Commission, a step forward in democratization. From its early beginnings as a response to the catastrophe of war in Europe, the European Union has evolved many times, responding to world events, challenges at home, and the demands of its citizens. It remains a work in progress, and there is still plenty to do.
It's amazing. It's so interesting. You know, I mean, people always talk about how America is such a young country, and but the EU, obviously not a country, but it's such a young organization. It's so much, even more young. You know, it's so young, and yet such a behemoth at this point in history already. You know, and it's exciting to see where it will go. That was a really great video. I see it's got some thumbs down, so I'm sure there's something in that video that was, you know, contentious, or let's see. Long live European Union. It's soaring how many people here seem to forget the significant good the EU has brought to their countries because a small minority of the decisions or measures taken by the EU were wrong. The EU is one of the most technocratic forms of government, even if it's not one in the traditional sense, and has brought a lot to member countries. The EU does laws, and that's about it. Let's remember that most other countries, richer ones even like the EU, still end up following EU law through the Strasbourg effect. The EU is great at legislature overall, way better than most governments, if not all governments. Let's be honest, I haven't seen so much mediocrity in the US form of government or in any member state specifically. It's true that collaboration helps. Okay. So I guess there's some EU haters. That's expected, right? I mean, nothing's perfect, so you know, it's an important role to always be critical of, you know, these types of things, and I'm sure there's lots of things, you know, there's lots of details I don't know. But anyway, fascinating. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.